welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisen, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And today joining us from North Carolina is Kayla Logue, Logue. Hope I said that right. Hopefully if I didn't screw it up. And the book is Always Squeezing Lemons. And, I think that our listeners, and you can get this book on Amazon. You also can go to her website, which is KaylaLogue.com. There you can learn more about her, the book, speaking, work with her, resources. It's quite a robust website, so I'd recommend that you guys go there. Kayla, good day to you. Thanks for finally getting on the show and spending some time with my listeners to talk about your wonderful journey. Well, painful in many points, but also that's how people learn, right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this.
Well, good. And I'm super excited to have you. So I'm going to tell people a little bit about you, Kayla. She graduated from University of South Carolina, with a BA in communication, and she earned a magna cum laude honors. Congratulations on that. During her time there, her colleagues and she founded and hosted the University Broadcast. What was that all about? Was that a podcast?
It was actually the full news. So it was the university news station. I went to school for broadcasting and journalism. And my coworker and I, or colleague at the point, we started it there.
Well, congratulations for that. And her passion for writing ignited during her college years when she pursued journalism, contributing essays to university publications. And she went on as the president of the Communications Club. She then moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and took on a role of director of communications and HR for a small government consulting firm. Amidst all these challenges in 2020, marked the start of COVID pandemic and the end of her marriage. She's going to be speaking about with us that today. She recently founded a nonprofit called Move Into Words. And you can learn more about her at the website. And it's very easy to get to that website. We'll put a link into the blog itself. But Kayla, I think everybody's interested in finding about always squeezing lemons or making lemonade. However you want to put that. And, it is interesting when we go through these traumas in life, what we learn and what we take out of it based on our perspective. So the title kind of suggests being resilient, right? And making the best of tough situations. You start the book off right away with the situation with the divorce and kind of the pain. Can you tell us about the meaning behind the title and really how it resonates with your life journey? Because we said before we came on here that writing this book was very cathartic.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, kind of as you already mentioned, when it comes down to, the lemon metaphor, squeeze lemons of life, we're all very familiar with it. But I think the really important part of the title is always, because life is always going to throw you challenges. Growth is never ending, and it's up to us to always be squeezing the lemons of life. And, when challenges come our way, it's up to us to respond. And that's it. We just have control over how we respond to that. And, hurt, heartbreak, mistakes, failure, no matter how high you are, there's going to be lows. And I think that's really important. So when it comes down to the always part, it is pretty much the underlying meaning, resilience. And, through the book, the entire journey is definitely a journey of healing, self-awareness, learning, screwing up to figuring it out. And for me, the mentality I've been able to kind of take away not only from those experiences that I very vulnerably write in the book and are pretty applicable for anybody that reads it and trying to overcome their own journey is the mentality of confidence and faith in myself. And definitely, again, the resilience part. Life, it will always throw you lemons. There will always be challenges. And it really is just up to us to take them head on.
So this is an off the wall question, but you're an exceptionally attractive, beautiful woman. And, throughout your life, I'm sure all of your friends said that too. And I've always heard this said that, people that are actually prettier can actually have a lot more challenges. So here you attracted a really nice young man, married him into your life. And frequently we know that, maybe sometimes that's a driving factor behind men. Huh?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it seemed like this, what you call picture perfect life. You were explaining in the book, what that was like. What was the most challenging aspect of making that decision, and how did you find the strength to follow through? Because you had to walk away from what seemed like this picture perfect life. I see people peer in other people's windows and they think, oh boy, those people are just freaking perfect. They got the nice car, the nice house, the beautiful wife, the beautiful husband. They're playing tennis, they're doing whatever. And they're like, it isn't so good. So explain what was going on with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I really realized is I was so focused on chasing an illusion of perfection, right? Which is kind of why I call it the picture perfect life. I was focusing on what I felt like I should be doing or what I had to do, kind of society standards of, going to school, getting a job, marrying, and having kids. And I'm by no means saying any of that's wrong, but I was only prioritizing the next step. I wasn't really asking myself, well, what do I want? Who do I want to be? And what does that even look like? And so that's where I really kind of found myself coasting and complacent and just stuck. And so when I found myself kind of at that point, there was a reflection, and I kind of write about that transition of understanding how stuck I felt in this picture perfect life and smiling for the camera on the outside. So it was the facade, but I was miserable. I was not happy in my relationship. I felt capped out in my job. I tried to write goals down and I had none. And that's not how I operate. I'm a very goal-oriented, strong-minded go-getter. And I was just like, what am I doing?
So how did you get out of this deep depression? Because usually what happens is emotionally, physically, and spiritually, we're kind of off track, right?
Oh yeah, I was definitely off track.
Well, we've actually run off the tracks. And there are times in everyone's life out there right now, they're totally relating to you. Like it doesn't have to be a relationship. It can be money. It can be, a relative. It can be all kinds of things that are interfering. What actually gave you the strength to go through with making the decision you needed to get your life back on track, or let's just call it back to your alignment with your values? Because look, you had a certain set of values as a young lady coming into this, and you had to compromise those somewhere along the line, and they were not in alignment with who Kayla was.
Absolutely. And I think all of that combined, it just became too heavy of a weight to carry. And I knew I didn't want to carry that weight anymore. So at that point, it was either I have to make a decision to do something about it, or I stay stuck here carrying this weight that I no longer want to have this burden of. And when, again, as you said, it can be any situation. For me, I knew I needed to relieve my relationship. I knew I needed to figure out what I really wanted for myself. I knew I needed to form a much stronger relationship with myself to even get to that point. So for me, I had to completely start over. I mean, I left with $900. That the divorce is a little messy, and I just started over. I had no direction. I was in the middle of COVID, and all I really had was faith in myself that I would figure it out. And, even at the lowest point, I think that's something that everybody should take away is no matter where you're at, if you take full control of your life, you are always the pilot of your own life, and you should never fear changing directions because a better destination is never overrated. And I write that at the end of the first chapter, which, is kind of when I just threw up the deuces to my whole life and started over, just started with a clean slate. And, when you do have that faith in yourself, that underlying faith, and you don't have to have an exact clear path, but you have to get started. You have to know that where you're at is not where you want to be, and start making moves.
Well, those are words of wisdom for certain, and it was learned as a result of, I think the Buddhists say there is pain and then there's suffering, but the suffering is your choice.
Absolutely.
Right? And so how long we live with that suffering is really our own choices. Now, granted, we're all going to have pain, whatever that pain was. In your case, separation and getting out of a marriage. But the suffering that comes afterwards is something that you have a choice to decide how long that is and where you are. And one of the things you did is you mentioning how journaling played this significant role. And in cases, I'm looking through this with the dates and, you're kind of like almost like your journal. And journaling is very cathartic, and it's played a significant role in your healing. And I think many people either started and stopped journaling, because you'll ask people, it's like, yeah, I started it. No, I don't do it anymore. I'm trying to do it digitally, or, whatever. I think the old handwritten way is probably still the best way. But do you have any advice for anybody right now is kind of hesitant to start a practice of journaling to actually make it be cathartic for them? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I used to think journaling was a really stupid idea. Truly. I thought there's no way, a 25-year-old with a long overdue diary that was going to be helpful at all. And my sister, she was the one that really, was adamant about me trying to do it. And I think I really realized after I did, I was just scared to write down all my thoughts. I didn't want to be honest with how I really was feeling. I didn't want to put that on the paper. It's actually in my book too. I talk about how I just always outran my thoughts. I had the, athlete mentality. I played sports all my life, and I was just like, suck it up, rub some dirt on it. And that's not how emotional trauma or, real emotions and feelings work. Like, you have to process them in order to build upon them and grow your self-awareness. And when I started journaling, it really has been life-changing, which is why it's in my book. It's why we have a whole nonprofit, with that kind of as a basis. But for people that are just starting, I always say, like anything, start simple. You don't have to sit down. You don't have to be an author to journal. It doesn't have to make any sense. You just need to write down what you're thinking. It could be one sentence a day. It's better than nothing. I always say, an easy gratitude practice, write down 3 things you're grateful for. It takes literally 2 minutes, And the other thing too, I always say it's really important for people who are like, well, I never really got too much out of journaling. Like, are you being honest with what you're writing down? Are you trying to sugarcoat it? Because if you do that, then yeah, you're not going to get anything out of it. So I always say be vulnerable with the pages. Just word vomit, write it down. So I think starting simple and being honest with yourself are 2 really important things for people that really want to start journaling, or maybe have fallen off the train of the practice.
So Kayla, what were you running from to?
What was I running from, like in my mind?
What were you running from, and what were you running to?
I've never had anybody ask me the question that way. So I think I was honestly outrunning myself, or trying to outrun myself, in the sense of I didn't really want to process my thoughts. I wasn't really ready to forgive myself for, compromising myself in ways that I know I hold myself to a higher standard. And like I was running physically a ton in the summer of 2020. I mean, just nonstop. And that was, and I was kind of going through my lowest point. And I would say that was the biggest thing. I hadn't forgiven myself. I was really confused. I was really lost. And I was definitely running towards wanting to find out who I was, really wanting to have that strong relationship with myself, and, trying to had that level of self-awareness. And journaling was the gap that bridged that for me. It truly was, writing it down and really, again, being honest, but also self-forgiveness, forgiving myself for the years that I compromised, knowing that I shouldn't have, forgiving myself for hurting people that, in my own feelings and thoughts at the time, I just pushed aside and kept going. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of her healing journey as well.
Well, look, you said you were an athlete and you ran, and I remember the times when I went through marital challenges, I would run. And I always was like, the cathartic element of the time to actually be out in the air, be open, to be free with your thoughts, to let them run wild, and then let them go past very quickly, seemed to have a huge effect. And I think that's true for a lot of people. You get the endorphin release, you get the oxytocins, you get the kind of things you need that you're maybe not getting from other things in life, right? And I know that. Now, when you left this long-term relationship, everybody knows that's can be incredibly difficult, especially when there's a sense of obligation to others, right? It's like, okay, I committed to this marriage. Okay, now I'm going to end this marriage. And who am I going to hurt along the way? Who's going to get hurt in the process? The reality is you are being hurt as much as anybody, right? So how did you work through the feelings of the guilt and or the fear or both of judgment during this period, because you had to be judging yourself about making the decision, right? Like, oh no, who's going to hurt? His family, my family, everybody who knows us, everything, right? It's like a house of cards.
Absolutely. And I mean, honestly, I mean, it definitely was. And a lot of that had to do with, letting go of family, friends, relationships that you knew you wouldn't have anymore, that you had for a long time. And honestly, I didn't cope with it great all the time. I write about that in my book. There were times where I drank excessively. I had company with the wrong people. So for a minute, I don't think I handled it well. I was kind of just trying to cope in not great ways. And I think the biggest thing that helped me, and I write about even the support system, was I realized that the people that, wouldn't judge me, or even like myself, that like loved and cared about me, no matter what decision I made, they're there to support me. And the only time I'm going to disappoint them is if I'm disappointing myself. And that, for me, kind of that clarity of, people are going to judge you. People are going to say things. People are going to, try to bring you down. At the end of the day, the people that love you and truly care about you, they're always going to be there. And when it comes down to like your own decisions too, I mean, you can't compromise yourself for somebody else, just because you feel like you should. You never should. You have to be selfish before you can be selfless, because it's really the most selfless thing you can do. And when I really kind of put that together, I mean, it took a while, but when I was able to accept that, I've really checked my behavior. I really, changed who I spent my time with, and definitely the healing process got a lot easier.
Well, one of the things that usually is the case, and sometimes when we first go into a marriage or relationship, we don't really realize it, but we have this level of expectation that the other person's going to make us happy.
Mm-hmm.
And
For sure.
never in any case is that ever the case, that we should enter any relationship thinking that it's that person's obligation to make me happy. We've got to be happy ourselves as a result of whatever it is. And so no one usually, hardly ever, I'm not saying you can't have a great loving relationship and someone can be great to you, but your happiness is an inside job. It's your own job. And you mentioned this resume of overcoming obstacles in the book. What are some of the key skills or mindsets that you developed from the experiences that kind of continue to guide you today? You went through this experiences, you grew through it, you came out the other side a better person for it, and you certainly took something from that, right? And I guess my question is, what did you take from it that the listeners out there today could learn from what you took from the pain?
I think at the end of the day, and kind of going back to how you said, we choose to suffer, right? We feel pain, but we choose to suffer. It's really all about being present. And I know we hear it all the time, but hearing it and feeling it on the level that you're able and capable of doing is very different. A lot of the times we don't choose to be present. We're so caught up in what's next, or, where we're not at, or, comparing ourselves to somebody else's progress, rather than recognizing we are here, we are healthy, we have a lot to be thankful for, and giving ourselves credit. And, I learned that a lot of the times too, even like with fear and, anxiety, it's all things out of our control. So when you're present, you focus on what is in your control. And so it's just like really the power of the mind. And for me, I prioritize things for myself on a health level daily. I work out, I take time for journaling, I keep my space, I prioritize saying no to the things that I don't want to do anymore, which was a huge thing for me. And the company I keep is really important. I don't.
Oh, yeah.
I spend my time with people that I know have the right energy, that we're on the same page. I no longer compromise myself. So, but until I was able to be present and really, find who I was, what I really wanted that was almost impossible. So being present and truly being present are very different. But that was one major thing for me.
Well, I get that you're extremely mindful and you're very focused. And I think that, as you went through this with the fear, right, making the decision was fearful. You had to be shaking in your shoes, right? Usually most people are. But it's very discomfortable. You're like in discomfort. And they say you don't grow unless there's some discomfort. How did you take those opportunities, and what would you tell the listeners right now in a shift in mindset that really helped you kind of get through it? What advice might you give them to say, hey, look, I know there's pain. You don't have to accept the suffering, but the reality is you do have to have a shift in mindset, because in this world of psychology, and I have a master's degree in spiritual psychology, there's usually only two emotions, love and fear. Mm-hmm. And if you stop loving yourself, right, it's very hard to love someone else.
100%. It's almost impossible. I don't think you can.
Right. And so what you were telling me is you went through this period of not really loving yourself. What advice would you give somebody today to get out of that, and then also to eliminate and or reduce the amount of fear they're dealing with, to make a decision to either end something or change something or do something different in their life?
Well, fear really is anxiety of the future, right? It's a lot of the times situations that we make up in our mind that don't ever happen or aren't going to happen. It's that negative narrative of like, well, what if this goes wrong? What if I fail here? What if this doesn't happen? And these are all things that are hypothetical, right? A lot of the times when we're scared, we don't think of the opposite. We don't think of, well, what if it works out? What if this goes the right way? What's next? And when that narrative alone for me is, I'd say, and I think during the time, like as I reflect back, I don't really know if I know how it came about, but I just knew I didn't have an option. I knew I was either going to stay stuck and not make a difference, or I was going to figure it out. And I think just that understanding of I was no longer going to suffer in the situation I was. Like, I was done dealing with being stuck or not feeling free and figuring it out, that it was enough pain to choose the counter. And whatever that looked like, I was like, I will figure this out. The opposite, what if? It's not what if it fails? Because if it fails, then I'll figure out the solution on the other side. There's always a silver lining. And, if you're hitting rock bottom, you just got to keep crawling up, and I think in terms of the way the practicalness of it is,
so your glass was half full, not half empty. So
yes.
The other thing is, and I'm sure you've heard this, you said something about fear, and I want to just repeat for many of the listeners, I'm sure they've heard this. The acronym for fear is false expectations appearing real. You basically said that. But I always think sometimes that acronym, that somebody just remembers, false expectation appearing real, is really a great way to look at fear. And fear frequently controls our life. It starts to consume us. It starts to be every element. It then leads to anxiety and depression and all these other things that we have in our life. And one of the most significant realizations for you was understanding that you were in control of your responses. You write about that in the book. Even when life feels out of control, which I'm sure it did in so many cases, how is that insight about control changed your approach to any challenges that you might come up against now in life?
I think it just makes it a little more simple, in the sense of I don't think of things that are outside of my control. I don't, have anxiety about other situations that, no matter how I respond, are going to pan out anyway. I can only deal with what's in front of me, and it simplifies it. It simplifies and prioritizes it. I'm like, okay, here's, rather than me being scared or freaked out about this and that, there's 1,000 things that I could be over here. I'm dialed in. I'm like, okay, what is the next step? What do I need to do? How can I handle this? So it's all focused on what I need to do, and the outside noise, obstacles are going to pan out the way they are. And I just have to be able to be, pretty much on defense, figuring it out. But at the same time, when you're focused on what's in your control, you're always on offense. And I think that's also what's really important. It just makes your mind a lot less chaotic, because I definitely used to not be that way. But when I realized like you can be the cause, problem, and solution for everything in your life, your world, your narrative changes. And I think that's something if everybody could adopt and really truly understand what that mindset means and take real control of their lives, a lot of the world would be a lot different.
Well, it sounds to me, like after reading, actually, you're a very driven person, right? So in other words, you have these goals, you're an athlete, you go in these situations, and, usually people like that, they want to be in control. And when they lose control, it's like it's a train wreck, It's like a yard sale, a yard sale when you go down the mountain on your skis, right? They call it a yard sale, right?
Yeah.
So one of your most what you wrote about in the book was really this importance of support networks, and I think support networks are, that's why you have the nonprofit. That's why you're helping women. That's why you're doing what you're doing. How has your family and your friends played a role? And how do you build and nurture these kind of relationships, especially during the challenging times that, like you've been through, right? It's like, okay, it's okay to sever this. Now I could just sever this with everybody. I could just say, okay, I'm going to make a whole new community of support for me. Or you can practice loving kindness and go back to all those relationships and attempt to hold on to the relationships where there was compassion and understanding. I mean, whether it was his family or people in your family or people that you knew or people you guys hung out together with who kind of made up the tribe, all of that changes. But the reality is it doesn't fundamentally have to change that drastically. What did you get out of that?
Well, I definitely, obviously, my close friends and family were a backbone through the whole situation. So I'm very blessed and fortunate to have that. But one thing I write in my book that I think is a really important perspective, whether it's an intimate relationship, friendship, partnership, is relationships are hard work, but they shouldn't be hard and they shouldn't feel like work. Meaning that, when you have somebody, because when you have somebody that cares about you and you care about somebody else, it's one of those things where it shouldn't be that hard to reach out or stay connected or, offer a helping hand. And work is exhausting. I love my job. I love what I do. I love I put myself in this position, but the world is already a hard enough place, right? Like we already have to work hard to do what we want to do. Relationships shouldn't feel like work. They should feel easy. They should flow. And I think for me, that's been a really fundamental thing that's allowed me to know what relationships I want to keep in my life and the ones that should be there, because it's easy. It's fluid. It's not, oh my gosh, I don't really want to talk to this person or I don't want to do this. And a lot of times that comes down to your values and morals. If you don't value the same thing, you don't have the same morals, probably shouldn't be hanging out. And that's the one thing I think that hold a lot of people back is you grow and you change. And some people don't grow and change with you. And that's okay. But over the past couple of years, even, I have, multiple relationships that, don't get me wrong, there's no bad blood, but I don't choose to hang out with them anymore. We're just on different pages and wish them nothing but the best, but they're going to hold me back. We don't do the same things on a daily basis. We don't believe the same things. We don't want the same things. And that's okay. But it really is important, your environment, no matter who it is, that you surround yourself with those people that, again, don't make your relationships feel hard or like work.
Oh, you get to choose that. And, you say, and on that note, getting comfortable and being uncomfortable is a major theme in the book. What strategies have helped you to embrace this mindset or shift in mindset? And how can others start to make peace with this discomfort?
Kind of as you said, nothing great ever happens in your comfort zone. And I do find that a lot of people don't want to even try to get to that point, though, to try to feel that greatness. Like we don't like being uncomfortable. And I think the simplest way to really at least dab your toe in it and keep trying to be more uncomfortable with situations to get where you want is realizing it's temporary. Discomfort it's not going to always be that way. But in order to make strides forward to, have rewards or some sort of fulfillment, you have to get uncomfortable. I always like to use the analogy of the cold plunge, which I do often. I have one at our house, and it's 3 minutes every morning as soon as I wake up. And do I want to plunge my body in 43-degree like tub of water at 5 in the morning? No, I don't want to do that. Right? It's challenging, but it's temporary. And after I get out,
Safe for your circulation system, though.
well, there's so many benefits, and you feel awesome. So the reward of those temporary 3 minutes is absolutely worth it. And it's the same thing with anything. I mean, I've never once talked to somebody that's successful and has ever accomplished anything great that didn't have to go through pain or hardships or, try something they didn't want to or do something they didn't want to. It's just a part of growing. And even
so do you have a somatic breathing practice as well? Are you involved in,
I need to get better at my breathing. In terms of my breathing practices.
Well, I think, what is it? The guy, Renholm? What's the guy who does the cold plunges? The author. At any rate, he's the one who kind of, he's the guy from the Netherlands or wherever that started kind of the whole thing. And my point is, whether it's a sauna or it's a cold plunge or it's breathing, somatic breathing, which is a big thing now, all of those do one thing. They, I don't want to say this way. How do I say it? They jolt the system, they reboot the system, and they bring you a tremendous amount of endorphin releases as a result, which makes you feel better the rest of the day, no matter what you do. So whether it's breathing, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's cold plunges, all of those are good for you. Now, share one of the most surprising discoveries about yourself that came from your journey and how it may have reshaped or shaped your approach to how you preview life.
So I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think the biggest thing I really realized was I was always putting others before myself. So I definitely would compromise myself, or I would serve others' needs before my own, or even if I really knew what my own were. I was just kind of going through society's checklist.
Why'd you do that? Because I still do that. And you know what happens to me sometimes, Kayla? I get really angry.
Yeah. No,
I get pissed off at myself because it's always me doing something else for someone else. And the reality is, it's like, oh, where about the time for me?
saying no. And it's so much easier said than done, because I literally write about it. I was always the yes woman. And don't get me wrong, there's still times where I find myself doing things where I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing
exactly
this? And I keep checking myself. So don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect.
Well, you know what it is? It's because you know how to do it. Frequently sometimes, whether it's a spouse or it's a coworker or whatever it might be, or a friend, and they say, oh, can you help me with this? You don't just say no. You go ahead and do whatever it is because they're asking your advice or your help to be able to do that, right? So,
but as you said, you get angry, right?
Yeah, so I do. I actually get angry at myself.
And topping kind of the other thing, I guess, in terms of like full circling, that is being selfish before you can be selfless, because it is the most selfless thing you can do, which is kind of what I touched on. And when I say that, is in order for you to be the best version of yourself for others, you got to do it for yourself first. So if you're angry because you're helping somebody else, you're clearly not giving yourself the right time, right? And so for me, it was like a big full circle. And I would say that's the biggest thing that I've now prioritized. It's helped me a lot through all of my journey.
Well, look, you've had an incredible journey, and you're quite successful in the real estate business. And you also have this nonprofit that you're working on. Tell our listeners why you opened up the nonprofit and started it. What is its purpose? How can they learn more? And what is your ultimate give back? Meaning like, oh yeah, I did this. Did you do this for Kayla, or did you do this to like give back some of yourself, or have others find themselves as a result of joining the nonprofit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll even touch on kind of the ending part of why I did this, and then build off top of it. But even when I wrote my book, I remember going to a workshop and everyone's like, they're promoting their business or their brand. And I'm like, I just know I have a book I need to write that I know can help other people, you know? So the very beginning of everything I'm doing and have done has just been because I know my story, my experiences, and who I am as a person can definitely help others. And I just never want to see anybody stuck or lost the way I was, you know, I've experienced feeling that way and truly coming out on the other side. And don't get me wrong, I'm still growing, learning, healing, but from where I was 4 years ago and where I am now and what I've experienced through that process and how I've overcome it, I know I can help so many people in that sense. And moving to words, you know, Bridge is what the one practical tool for me that I found was truly life-changing, which was journaling. And so it's the fundamental of the movement into words, right? So move into words. So we have a workout for the body and then a workshop for the mind. So right now we've done quarterly events where we host, you know, we mostly for young professionals, and we do a workout, whether it's boxing, HIIT, yoga, walking, and then we provide journals. We show practical tools. We talk about journaling as something that, you know, not only there that you do it, but on a daily basis. And we also bring motivational speakers. So we have like a topic of the day.
Cool.
Really just allows people to network, but we have a big vision for the way we're going to expand. We want it to be in multiple cities. We have a lot of other programs and plans that we want to build out, but we just launched our first kind of fundraising operation, which is called Operation 1 Million Journals. So of course, the mission being to put 1 million journals in the hands of 1 million young professionals.
All you have to do, Kayla, is go to a journaling company and joint venture with them. And
trust me, we're thinking about all these things, but it's really...
As you say this and you're telling me what you're doing, you know, people coming together, people journaling together, people moving together, their bodies, right? This is all part of this.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting back on, and you may not know these folks because you're kind of young, but many of my listeners will. I had the honor of sitting in the living room with George Leonard, and George Leonard and Michael Murphy founded Estalon. So it's here in Big Sur, California, just right up the road here. And they actually started a thing called ITP, Integrative Transformative Practice. And ITP was a combination. Anybody could do it. But when you left the room, it was like, oh my gosh, what happened? Because it was a meditation. It was Tai Chi. It was yoga. And it was combined into one practice. And when people left the room, they were like, oh my God, what happened to me? It's like they had a Satori experience, like a one with everything, right? And I see that what you want to do is help either, is it all women or is it women and men, or is it, who can come to this? Is it mainly women?
Actually, we have a pretty big mix. It's almost, probably 60-40 when it comes down to 60% women, 40% men for the past couple events that we've had. It's mostly young professionals. So really, you know, age range anywhere from like 18 to 40 is kind of what we've been seeing. You know, it's of course opportunities for networking and community as well, and bringing like-minded, growth-minded individuals into one place, right? People that want to be better for themselves.
And are you teaching a course around journaling?
I'm working on my own personal course around it.
Okay.
Yes.
So we know that's to come for all of our listeners. Go look for that course. It's going to come because look, journaling, there's so many people that do kind of like journaling events. And I really think that it's incredibly cathartic, along with meditation, mindfulness practice, yoga, you know, your cold plunges, all of that fits in that line. And I just want to wish you tremendous success with the charity and the work that you're doing at Outlook. You said 1 million people. Is that right? That's what it is? You're going after 1 million?
Operation 1 million journals.
1 million journals. So I will help you get there because I will drive a lot of people over to you.
Please do that. Amazing.
And then our last question here. If there were 3 takeaways that people would get from we always squeezing lemons, what would you want those nuggets to be? And how would you like people to utilize those nuggets in their life?
So I mentioned the first one, being when you realize you can be the cause, problem, and solution for everything in your life, your world changes. So it's really kind of that mindset shift of you are in control. You're in the driver's seat. You make the choices, whether they lead to consequences or rewards. And at the end of the day, it's only up to you to continue to make the decisions to keep pushing forward. But when you stop blaming, or you stop, playing the victim role, your life changes, and I mean, not saying that you even have to be playing the victim role to be in that situation, but maybe you're just stuck, and that's where I was, and you need that little kick, right? Well, you have the choice. You can make the decision to move on or do something different. So that would be the first one. The next one I would say, I think it's really important, is success is subjective, and we get to define it individually. And when I say that, what my version of success, your version of success, anybody's version of success might mean something different. But we're so used to seeing what we feel like we need to succeed for. We need to make millions of dollars. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing that. But that might not be motivators for people, So defining what success means to you individually is really important. And that will help you, really identify what your values, your morals are, what you're doing. And maybe if you feel unfulfilled, you're probably trying to chase a version of success that isn't yours. And so when you can really kind of dial that back in, I think that's super, super important. And, the last one really, I think, is just have faith in yourself. Self-doubt is a killer. And, your own mental narrative can be your greatest asset or your Achilles heel. And when you have faith in yourself, when you know you will overcome anything, no matter what it is, it's pretty powerful what you'll be able to accomplish.
Well, those are 3 great takeaways. And for my listeners to repeat, the first one was basically you're 100% responsible for yourself. No one else is. All the excuses you make in life, that's all about who you are, not anyone else. 2 basically is how you define success in life, right? Did I get that right? So it's all up to you. And
Defining
the third one again?
Have faith in yourself.
Have faith. So if you walked away from this podcast and you took those 3 things and you put it into your life along with a journal, you'd be key. You'd be right on.
Yeah, for sure. Get yourself a journal and start writing it down.
So Kayla, namaste to you. Thank you for being on Inside Personal Growth and spending some time with our listeners who are definitely into this. And I'm sure that this conversation is going to resonate with all of them. Blessings to you on your journey with the nonprofit and the work that you're doing to help people see how this very easy, simple thing, once you break through and you're able to start to write about yourself and be truthful, actually can be a wide opening. One suggestion I'd make is when I was getting my master's degree in spiritual psychology, we did a similar thing around writing journals. But basically what the instructor said was, now this wasn't the whole time, but it was much of it, whatever you wrote, wad it up and put it in the fireplace, like you're getting rid of it. So literally not keep it in the journal to reread it. You've already written it. It already came out. Throw it away and put it in a fireplace. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I will say actually when you're in a tough relationship and you're going through something, that the pain associated with that and the release of putting that into the fire pit was really, really quite comforting. So
yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, exactly. Very comforting. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and enjoy, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on Inside Personal Growth. We appreciate your support. And for more information about new podcasts, please go to InsidePersonalGrowth.com or any of your favorite channels to listen to our podcast. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.